Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, we're going to go over another craft that I finished this league, and this item in question is actually probably the hardest craft that I've ever done, and it's definitely one of the craft that I'm most proud of ever in my entire time playing PoE because this thing is insane, and quite frankly, it's a miracle it even exists. Now, what we're talking about is a 12-link claw. So there's going to be a bit of a story time, and at the end of the video, I'll take you guys on a step-by-step guide on how to make this. So if you're not interested in the story time, you can just skip over to that portion of the video. But there's definitely an interesting story for this claw. So this claw is actually a bit of a miracle, as I mentioned, because it is full tier 1. It is actually the only full tier 1, like 6 times T1 12-link weapon in the entire league, I believe, or at least with these sort of affixes. I believe there's other ones for wands, but even in standard, this is the second in existence of full 6 times T1 on a 12-link claw, which is absolutely insane. Now, to put it in perspective, to recraft a 12-link claw like mine here, if you were not going for tier 1, if you accepted tier 2 in basically every additional slot, so like T2, elemental damage with attack skills, critical strike chance, and crit multi, it would cost you around 4,000 exalts to make, which at current times is around 8 mirrors to make this item, which sounds like a lot of currency because it is, but to some crafters, that is definitely affordable. However, if you wanted to remake my exact claw with full tier 1, right? T1 Ruthless, T1 Wed, T1 Multstrike, T1 Crit, T1 Crit, it would actually cost you a whopping 11,500 exalts. Now, that is actually very conservative because one of the biggest thing that we have to do on this claw, crafting this claw, is augment influence. And right now, they're going for anywhere between 40 and 60 exalts. And in my calculation, I counted them at 40 exalts, which is definitely on the minimum. So 11,000 exalts on average is a minimum to recraft this item from scratch, which is just mind-blowing that I was even able to craft this. But of course, there's luck involved, and this one was actually a bit of a wild ride because we've had some really low lows and some really high highs when it comes to crafting this item. So let me give you guys a bit of a rundown of the story time, if you will, of this item. So it all started with actually a pretty impulsive decision. I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to craft a 12-link weapon. So I started doing the craft. We're going to look into the step-by-step guide a little bit later on. And I got to the point where I augment influenced for my third prefix, and I hit T2 elemental damage with attack skills. Now, I hit it on the third try, which has an average of about 9.5, so I was like, you know what, it doesn't make any sense to try again for like 1% damage. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it. So I kept the T2 elemental damage with attack skills, then we started working on the suffixes, and we got to the point where we had 3 suffixes, which were not what we needed, which means we had to do a reforge keeping prefixes. So we head over to TFT and we do a reforge keep prefix. And unfortunately, the person who actually did the craft did a reforge keep suffix, which completely wipes the claw. It basically means that we have to go back from scratch. Now, given the fact that these sort of items are extremely expensive to make, the guy who made that mistake basically put my buddy, who was taking care of the crafting of the claw, on ignore, and then he deleted his post of selling the craft on TFT, and he basically just disappeared from the face of the earth. Yes, we've put in a report or whatever on TFT, but it just doesn't matter, because even if we got to talk to him or whatever, at the end of the day, we all know that he can't afford to remake the prefixes because those alone are anywhere between 400 to 1,000 exalts. So we kind of just let it go, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with the 12-link project. Someone bricked my prefixes, whatever. But I still had a little bit of currency left over. I had about 2 mirrors and some amount of exalts coming in from the copies from our physical bow. So I was like, maybe we'll try again if I can find a base. Because I did not want to do redo prefixes. I was like, nope, I don't want to do it. It's too annoying. And again, once we go into the step-by-step, you'll see just how annoying it is. But one of them actually popped up. A claw with triple T1 prefixes, T1 Ruthless, 40% more attack, and T1 Wed for 1 mirror. Now, I messaged the guy, and it was in a tab called WIP, which stands for work in progress. So I figured, he's not actually selling it. He's just putting it up for a mirror, but he's not actually going to sell it. So I kept going on about my day, and then like 30 minutes later, he messages me back. He's like, oh, I was AFK. Do you still want this? And I was like, what? This is crazy. He's actually going to sell it. So 1 mirror was definitely a good deal for the prefixes at that point, because they were triple T1, and as I said, the average cost of getting triple T1 would be around 900 exalts, so a mirror was basically half of that. So I was like, that's a good deal. So I bought it. And again, we started working on the suffixes, reforge speed, and so on and so on. And I was utilizing, a lot of people for my chat and a lot of, TFT for reforging and reforge key prefix and blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of did that for a few hours. And then eventually we got to the point where someone actually hit reforge speed without crafting prefixes cannot be changed. Now, that person happens to be a friend of mine, no noob. It's just, mistakes happen, accidents happen. Again, someone who I know for a fact will not be able to repay this, and I'm not going to force them to play to try to repay it. So we just called it a failure. We said, okay, well, this is the second time someone has bricked the claw. The prefixes are once again completely dead. I've got no more bases. I think I'm over this. But then the initial claw, which was bricked, right? The guy who actually got someone to do the reforge and who bricked it, he still had the base, which had no prefixes on it, but I still had imprints left over. And again, we'll talk about the step-by-step guide on why imprints are important. But we still had an imprint of the prefixes. And before I had bought the second base with the triple T1 for 1 mirror, right? Because yes, that mistake cost us 1 mirror plus everything we had invested in the suffixes, which was around 1,000 exalts total. When that second brick happened, we literally lost 1,000x, or just about. So Photox had prepared, Photox being the co-crafter for this claw and for this bow and the crafter of this wand, he actually had 10 bases with Ruthless ready to go to Woke Orb. So he came over to me and he gave them to me, and I was like, dude, I don't want to do this again. Like, there's no way. We're running out of money. We've spent thousands of exalts. It's been bricked twice. It's not going to happen. So I was like, yeah, not going to happen. But then I was kind of sitting here and I was looking at the 1 mirror in my stash and I was like, you know what? A couple 100x 1 mirror. It's like, okay, I'll give it one more shot. So I used his Awakener Orb bases. He had 10 of them. And I used, I think, 3. I got to the point where I was able to AUG, missed the AUG, didn't successfully annul, started imprint, Woke Orbing again. Basically got to the point where I was on the last base with Ruthless on the Awakener's Orb. So I hit the Awakener's Orb, and I had an open prefix. I'm like, okay, it's time to go for it. We augment Influence. He doesn't hit it. He hits some random garbage, but it doesn't have an attack tag, which means I'm able to target Annul, so I do that. Augment Influence again, and brick. Unfortunately, this time it does have an attack mod, so I can't target annul it, so I have to YOLO annul. So I YOLO annul, and I actually beast crafted minus prefix plus suffix, and I actually hit it. So at that point, I've once again got an open prefix, so I'm ready to augment once more. So I augment, and there it is. After 4 tries, T1 elemental damage with attack skills is back on the claw, and this is a 1 in 19, so 4. It took me 4 for a 1 in 19. So at this point, I'm like, okay, there's a chance that this is doable here. So once again, we start doing the suffixes, reforge speed for T1 Multstrike, and we eventually hit it. And then we do, the rest of the stuff, and we augment the last. We got to the point where we get to augment the last suffix. We fail, which means we have to redo suffixes once again. And we do all the suffixes. We get to the point where we can aug Influence, and we fail again. And we get to the point where we can augment Influence again, and we fail again. Now at this point, we've once again lost about 600-700 exalts, something like that. In a few hours in the morning, and Photox is like, you know what, I'm just gonna head to the gym, we'll work on this later. He gives me back the claw. At that point, it's got no suffixes on it, nothing like that. I had been farming some reforge speed earlier in the day, before Photox got his hands on the claw, so I had one reforge speed on my bench, just 1. So I reforge speed and I actually hit T1 Multstrike, which means we're ready to go forward with the craft. Now, again, I'll talk about this step by step a little bit later on. So I start doing what we have to do, which is spamming exalts, annulling, blah, blah, blah. I get to the point where I annul the cannot roll attack mods, which is a 1 exalt craft to be able to target annul, which is a 50-50. I annulled it 7 times in a row. And I'm just mad. I'm like, dude, this game sucks. Like, I'm so over this. But I finally annul it after 7 attempts, right? 50-50s that I failed 7 times in a row. And I'm like, well, whatever, we go again. So I slam one more Exalt, and I hit T1 critical strike chance. So we are once again ready to go for the augments. Now I look on TFT, and I can't find an augment influence. They're very rare, obviously, because the league is a little bit older, so they're super rare. Can't find one. I end up finding one from, I end up finding a non-influence to influence instead, and it's from this guy who's got 0 vouches. He's a white name. Matter of fact, I asked him for his IGN, and it takes 3 attempts for him to tell me what his in-game name is, because he's that much of a noob, like a completely new player. I don't know how the hell he got his hands on a non-influence to influence. But I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I literally told him, if you steal this item, you're making me a favor. Like, I literally told him, like, I don't care about this anymore. And we're running out of money, right? So I'm like, you know what? Fine. So I head over to this guy, head over to his hideout, I give him the item, and I'm like, all right, dude, I tell him, I'm giving you 40x, which is the price for the non-inf to inf, but I tell him, if you hit any tier of the last modifier that I want, which is increased crit damage, I'm going to give you an extra 100x. And then he goes, oh, well, I hope I hit something. And then he traced me back, and he actually hit T1 increased critical damage, which is a 1 in 28 chance. So at this point, I'm ecstatic. The item is done. It's finished. It's over. The pain is over. So that's a bit of the story time on how this claw came to be. Honestly, by far the craziest craft I've ever decided to attempt. Super happy with the results too. You know, fully T1 is just absolutely beautiful to look at. Now, let's talk about the step-by-step guide on how to make such an item, because it is very, very annoying. And it all starts with getting an Imperial Claw with Shaper and a Shaper influence at item level either 75 or 76. Now, you might be wondering why 75 or 76, and that is because all of the affixes on this item, except for one, are basically, well, except for 2 actually, are all item level 75 or below. So basically, Multstrike, Crit Chance, Crit Multi are all 75. Elemental damage with attack skills, 75. The socketed skills is 83, and the Ruthless is 83. So why do we want 75? It's because we get to remove a lot of the weighting for when we start working on the suffixes, as well as the prefixes. So it just makes it easier if it's 75 or 76. But now, as you just heard me say, when we have an item, which is item level 75 with item level 83 mods on it, it's impossible to do. But there is one way that we can actually do that, and that's with beasts. So the way that you start this craft is that you'll take a claw, which is either item level 75 or 76, Imperial Claw, of course, that's base, and it's got to be Shaper. And you are going to hit it with a Alchemy in order to make it rare, and then you're going to annul every single mod on it. You want it to basically be rare, but with no mods, nothing on it. Right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to benchcraft the suffix. Anything can do. Fire res, lightning res, attack speed. It doesn't matter. Any suffix. And then you're going to use this beast called a Ferric Wolf Alpha. So what a Ferric Wolf Alpha does is it adds a prefix and it removes a suffix. But the thing that's interesting about these wolves, or these beasts, is that the item level of the modifier which is added to your item is based on the item level of the beast, not the item level of the item. What that means is that even if we have a level 75 or 76 item, when we use a level 83 Ferric Wolf Alpha, it is possible to get 40% more attack damage, right? This modifier here, this says socketed skills deal 40% more attack damage. This is an item level 83 modifier. So, on average, it will take you 121, I believe, Ferric Wolf Alphas in order to get the 40% more attack damage. Now, once you actually get it, right? Once you actually get the socketed more attack damage on a blue base, on a rare base by itself, right? The only modifier is going to be that, because the wolf is going to remove that suffix that you benchcrafted. So you're going to have just the socketed more. You're gonna craft on prefixes cannot be changed, which is a suffix, and then you're going to scour. Now, what happens when you scour an item with prefixes cannot be changed is it's going to remove all the suffixes. But the thing is, if your item only has a single prefix, which in our case only has socketed 40% more attack damage, when you actually scour it, it is going to go back to a magic item. Because rare items need to have at least 2 prefixes or 2 suffixes in order to actually be considered rare. So it goes back to a blue. Now, the advantage is when it goes back to a blue is that you can imprint it using the Kreisig Kimroll, this beast over here. This is going to create a save state of your item so that no matter what you do, as long as you don't vendor it or valid, you can basically bring it back to where it is. Now, once you have this socketed 40% more attack damage on a blue base, and you've made imprints of it, it's time to Awakener's Orb. Now, an Awakener's Orb is going to allow you to basically mash 2 items together of 2 different influences in order to make it, mixed, Shaper and Elder. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that the item that you're using to mash into this has level 20 Ruthless. And the thing about the level 20 Ruthless is that it needs the item that has it, which has to be a claw, by the way. The claw with the level 20 Ruthless needs to have no other influence modifier on it, because when you Awakener's Orb, the way that the game works is that it's going to pick 1 influence modifier from each item at random. Because the claw only has, the Shaper Claw only has socketed skills deal 40% more attack damage. When you Awakener's Orb it with the claw, which is Elder, for the Ruthless, it is guaranteed to pick both. However, if you had another Elder modifier on the claw, it could actually Awakener's Orb wrong and give you something you don't want. So you want to make sure that that Ruthless is by itself in terms of influence modifier. Now, there's 2 ways to go about getting Ruthless on the Elder Claw. The first one is to Jagged Spam. I believe it's a 1 in 90. And the other one is to just spam some alterations. I believe it's a 1 in 1,000 or something like that. Now, once you've got those bases ready, and I would highly recommend you prepare like at least 10 or 20 of them, if you were to attempt this craft, is you are going to Awakener's Orb the Elder Claw onto the Shaper Claw, which is going to give you a Shaper Elder Claw with both the socketed skill, 40% more attack damage, and the Ruthless. But after that, you need to make sure that when you Awakener's Orb, there's an empty prefix. If there is no empty prefix, you're going to have to annul for it or beastcraft with a Ferric Lynx Alpha, which is minus prefix plus suffix. And if you ever remove either the socketed 40% attack damage or the Ruthless, you basically have to imprint it back, which is that save state, and then you have to Awakener Orb again, right? Now, eventually, you'll get to the point where you have the Ruthless, the socketed, and then an open prefix. Now, you also need to have full suffixes, right? Because the next step is very expensive. It's an augment influence, and if you have an open suffix, there's a chance that it augments the suffix. So, in most cases, you'll have at least 1 or 2 suffixes already from the Awakener's Orb. If you have only 1 suffix, you will want to benchcraft one of these aspects, right? So by crafting one of these aspects, you're going to add a free suffix onto the actual item, and then for the last suffix, you can just use anything on your bench, right? Fire res, cold res, whatever, any other suffix. If you have 2 suffixes, you don't have to do the beast craft. You can just craft on some random stuff from the bench, as long as you have full suffixes. Now, at that point, you should have Ruthless, 40% more, an open prefix, and 3 suffixes. It's time to augment influence. Now, when you augment influence, there's a 1 in 19 that you will get this level 20 elemental damage with attack skills. However, it's divided by 2 when it comes to T2 elemental damage with attack skills, which makes it a 1 in 9.5, right? Which is not that bad, but it does depend on the price of augment influence. Earlier on in the league, when they're 10 or 20x, we're only looking at about 100x to get this going. But of course, later on, when they're 40x, especially if you're going for tier 1, it's 19 times 40. We're looking at like 800 exalts just for this one modifier without anything else. But if you're lucky, or if you do it enough times, you are going to get to the point where you have these prefixes: Ruthless, 40% more, and Wed. At that point, it's time to start working on the suffixes. So the way that you work on the suffixes is that by far the most important is the attack speed, which is why we are going to make sure that we only accept T1 Multstrike. So the way that we do that is we're going to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and we're going to reforge speed, right, with Harvest. A reforge speed more common, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, one of them is going to block all of them, and you're guaranteed at least one, so it just doesn't matter. But yeah, we're going to reforge speed, and it's a 1 in 11 to get T1 Multistrike. Now, in an earlier league, earlier in the league, maybe you would actually keep faster attacks instead of Multistrike. Maybe some people would rather that because they can use Awaken Multistrike. But Awaken Multistrike does not apply to Val Lightning Strike, which is where a lot of the damage comes from. So because of that, Awaken Multistrike is controversial, but you could also go with faster attacks. That's also a 1 in 11. So if you were to keep either Multistrike or faster attacks tier 1, it would be a 1 in 5.5 reforges, which is basically 11 exalts because it costs you 2x each time. Not too bad. However, if you're only going for T1 Multstrike, it's 22 exalts on average just to get that. Now, at that point, you've got two choices. Choice number one is to either augment influence or non-influence to influence, because you've got 3 influence prefixes and an influence suffix. You can also do non-influence to influence. However, non-inf to inf seems to be significantly rarer than augment influence, so it really kind of is up to you. But once you have the multi-strike, you can do that. And at that point, because you've got both the crit strikes and the multiplier both available, right? When you augment influence, it's a 1 in 8.5 to get either, or is it 7.5? No, I can't quite remember, but it's somewhere around there. It's like 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 to get either T1 or T2 of either incrit strikes or incrit multiplier. The alternative, once augment influences are really, really expensive, is to actually X-slam, which is what I did. So the way that you do that is that you would actually go to your hideout, and we're just going to imagine that my claw had just the multi-strike and nothing else on it, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type this accuracy and then cannot roll attack mods, right? And what I'll do is I'll craft this strength, dexterity, and accuracy because it's going to block strength, which can't roll in a claw, but it's going to block dexterity and accuracy, which are both bad because dexterity has a really high weighting, accuracy has a really high weighting, and accuracy is also an attack mod, which is why we block this, even though some modifiers could actually be higher if you were to block something else. This is by far the better block. So we're going to block this and we're going to slam an exalt on it. It's that simple. When we slam an exalt, there's 2 things that can happen. It's going to give us a modifier which does have an attack tag, at which point we need to craft on prefixes cannot be changed and annul, and it's a 1 in 3 that we actually brick the claw, because if we hit multi-strike, we got to go back to reforge speed. However, if we actually hit the attack mod, so let's just say it's, I don't know, life gain for each enemy hit by your attacks or something, if we annul that, then we can go right back to crafting the accuracy and slam another exalt and try again. Most of the time, around 70% of the time, however, when you actually use an exalt on the suffixes with the accuracy block, you're going to get a non-attack modifier, right? So that could be a lot of things like resistances, attributes. Those things don't have any attack tags. When that happens, you can craft on cannot roll attack modifier and simply annul. Now, because Ruthless, 40% more, Wed, Multi-Strike, they all have an attack tag, as you can see, it's going to guarantee that it's going to actually annul the modifier that you don't want. Of course, there's also a chance that it annuls the benchcraft, which is 1 exalt. In this case, you just recraft it. Now, we did the math on this, and on average, starting with no suffixes, to get to the point where you have T1 multi-strike and either tier 1 or T2 of either incrit damage or incrit strikes, it would cost you 174 exalts to get to the point where you can even augment the final affix. So 174 exalts. The alternative is to do augment influence, which is a 1 in 8, I believe, but that is that is like 40 exalts every single time, which is around 220 exalts. So that means it's 40 exalts and it's 1 in 8. So it's actually 320 exalts, my bad. So on average, it's actually a lot better to do the exalt slamming method if augment influences are expensive. If they're really cheap, let's say they were 10 exalts, then it would only be 80. So it'd be a lot better to do the augment or non-inf to inf. Now, once you've done this process of either the augment or the exalt slamming, and you get to the point where you hit either T1 or T2 of either the crit strikes or the crit damage, it's time to go for the final affix, right? Affix number 6, and at that point, it's an augment influence. There's no block. There's nothing you can do. It's a shot in the dark. You can do either augment influence or non-inf to inf. That is going to depend on whether you have a non-influence modifier on your claw, which you could also do by, bench crafting a non-influence, since everything else has an influence mod. And at that point, it's a 1 in 14 that you actually hit the final crit modifier, be it crit chance or crit multi. And it's a 1 in 28 that you actually hit tier 1 of either crit strike chance or crit strike multiplier, which is why I said the fact that this claw even exists is an absolute miracle in a temporary league with limited currency from, basically just me. Yes, I had, some help from my community. Yes, I had Fodex helping me out greatly and some other people who threw some currency at this claw. But the reality is this should not exist. This is a miracle. So absolutely crazy hyped about this item even existing. Again, like I said, I think earlier on in the video, these items typically have mirror fees around 200 to 300 exalts, on top of the fact that you need to provide a mirror. So it just goes to show that these items and crafting them is ridiculously expensive and also really annoying. I don't know if you've been listening for the last 25 minutes, but obviously it's a very annoying craft. But that is the step-by-step guide on how you actually go about crafting these items. Now, I know that I didn't show it in Craft of Exile, and that's just because a lot of these things would be really annoying to show in Craft of Exiles, like the Awakener orbing process and all that good stuff. But anyways, hopefully you guys found this video helpful. To those who will actually try and make one of these themselves, maybe this league and maybe in future leagues, good luck, because you absolutely will need it. But remember that for everybody who's unlucky, somebody needs to be lucky. For everyone who's lucky, someone needs to be unlucky. So you might just be the lucky one. And I've heard of people finishing these items for just a few hundred exalts and then profiting off of the mirror fees for thousands of exalts. So at the end of the day, RNG is RNG. That being said, before I go, I want to say a massive thank you to all my supporters. So Resco, Brandon, welcome back. Thomas, Mas, Nate, The Great Master, Alex, Tim, Mercury, Johnny, Nalgar, Solomon, Exo, Gio, Costa, and Bizon. Huge thanks to also everyone else who wishes to remain anonymous, anyone else who has supported me in the past. Again, I hope this video was informative, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.